But let's take a few minutes. We'll keep talking about this, but we have to bring Lauren on, actually, and I'll make her. But let's do a few minutes before we bring Lauren on of rhetoric, because this does matter a lot. The two thoughts behind this I'm going to throw right to you are, one, what is the relationship between the rise of the PR industry and the rise of Trump, and like having a conversation about propaganda and influence that is a global one, not just some kind of hyperventilating about Russian Facebook ads. And also, obviously we're in a moment where, we're going back to the lies and propaganda before the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan and so on. This is important stuff for us to think about. And you literally teach logic and rhetoric.
Yeah, well, I teach logic classes. I've taught, composition classes and things before. We've talked about rhetoric. And I talk quite a bit about it in the chapter that I wrote for a book that's coming out next year, which is called Myth and Mayhem, a leftist response to Jordan Peterson. And I co-wrote that with Matt McManus, Marion Trejo, Conrad Hamilton, and there's also an introduction by Slavoj Žižek.
Nice.
Yes.
That's a big score. Awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's good stuff. So my chapter about this was about Jordan Peterson, Christopher Hitchens, and the perils of good rhetoric. And so this is something that actually you and I have been talking about for a long time, going back to when I first met you at that Jordan Peterson conference in Boise, because sometimes when you're critiquing like the argument, you're sort of trying to critique Jordan Peterson on the level of arguments, it feels like you're missing the point, because
totally missing the point.
He's just sort of, like if he says he had a vision and a dream, what are you going to say? Like, no, have better dreams, like that's,
Actually, yes, that's literally what I would say to Jordan Peterson. Have better dreams.
Yeah, fair enough.
Be less of an asshole. I actually like that.
Yeah. But part of the reason that he can say things like there's a clip, not the one we're going to watch, but there's like an infamous clip where he's showing his students some like entwined snake imagery from ancient artwork, and he's saying,
Matt likes that one.
It's complicated to explain, but I think this is actually literally a depiction of the DNA double helix, that was discovered in the mid-20th century. And you watch that, it's astonishing because there's a room full of adults and nobody starts laughing when he says that. Right? And the reason is that whatever else is true about Jordan Peterson, he actually is a incredibly compelling speaker. And I think we have just a brief clip of him to illustrate that.
They don't believe that there's a Canadian identity. They don't believe that there's an American identity. They don't believe that there's a Western identity. They don't believe that value structures exist, or if they are, they're irreplaceable with some other value structure. They certainly don't believe that they have any biological grounding, that there's any such thing as a human being. It's all socially constructed, which is really convenient if what you want to do is be the author of an entirely social constructed utopia that you can run. And then when the Marxists say, well, that wasn't real Marxism, what it really means, and I've thought about this for a long time, it's the most arrogant possible statement anyone could ever make. It means, if I would have been in Stalin's position, I would have ushered in the damn utopia instead of the genocidal massacres, because I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. You don't understand it. And you're not that good.
Well, I have a big problem right there, because I've had a dream where I have Stalin-like power, and I do usher in a utopia.
Nice.
So screw you, Jordan Peterson. You don't know my dreamscape.
No, fair enough.
Yeah, how dare you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot obviously going on in that clip. He's doing the usual thing that he does where he wildly conflates Marxism and postmodernism, which are very different schools of thought. Right. And we've talked about that stuff before. And if you want my debunk of that particular argument, that's in the book. But what interests me more right now is why it sells so well.
Right.
So Jordan Peterson is, a best-selling author. He has, when he debated Slavoj Žižek, tickets to that in Toronto were going more than you could sell Maple Leaf tickets for, as a scalper.
Jesus. That's disturbing.
It is disturbing, right? I have spent a lot of time in college bookstores, and they've all got copies of 12 Rules for Life. And, along with the anodyne self-help advice, most of which is fine, he's got all the kind of stuff that's in there, right?
Right.
So a lot of people are buying what he's selling. Why is that? And trying to think about that made me think of somebody I like about a million times more than I like Jordan Peterson, even though obviously I have deep disagreements with a lot of his late-in-life political positions, who's Christopher Hitchens. So Hitchens, in the last years of his life, was the subject of all of these YouTube compilation videos that people had put together, that of his sort of, rhetorical power chords, that they'd called, these are his Hitch slaps.
Right.
And so we've also got a clip of a few of the Hitch slaps.
Well, I asked her about, because she wasn't content just to say religious people volunteer for charity as if that was news to anybody, but she had to couple it with a smear against Fabianism and social democracy. Now, as a matter of fact...
Well, they weren't there, Christopher. That's all I was saying.
I'm so sorry to say that without
the
efforts of Fabianism...
But you're good at smears.
The efforts of Fabianism...
What's wrong with the smear?
I don't... I'll get to the end of this sentence if it kills you.
I, for one, will take it as extremely insulting if any person of faith makes the assumption that their faith gives them a moral edge on me. I want to hear a lot more apologizing from the faith-based communities for the evil that they've done before they even start clearing their throats and telling me I wouldn't know right from wrong without their permission. I'm sorry, I won't be, can't be spoken to in that tone of voice, and nor should any of you.
So what if God actually exists, sir? Would he not have been good to you?
No. He wouldn't. Because if that were true, it would mean that I had an eternal supervising parent who would never die and let me get on with my life, never let me grow up, would keep me under surveillance.
But you have, sir.
And supervision every minute of my life, and constantly asked me to be thanking and praising him.
Yeah.
I think it would
that
be
wasn't part of the scenario.
like living in North Korea. I think it would be a horrible outcome.
Well, not sure that God is Kim Jong-il, but what if what I said is true?
Well, ask Kim Jong-il, he has a different opinion.
Okay, well, those were fun.
Yeah, those
even as exhausted as I am by atheism, those were very fun. I agree with those. Mostly.
Yeah, no, those were very fun. But it's also interesting to kind of take a step back here, because if you read a lot of what Hitchens wrote over the course of his life, I know Griscom has, that. He does have a lot of like really smart and insightful things to say about a lot of subjects. But I think you've got to admit that in the last, 10 years or so of his life, which is when all these Hitch slap videos were made, that was, political judgments aside, right? It's not just that I disagree with him, right? That, although God knows I do, but it's that's where he had the least interesting things to say of any phase of his career.
We're in the precursors of the global financial meltdown. We have a global war on terrorism generating a new hegemonic model across Asia, Africa, the Middle East. And this guy is spending the better bulk of his time using a brilliant intellect and witty presentation to dunk on people for believing in fairy tales.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that's sad.
I recently re-listened to arguably his collection of essays. It's on Audible, at least. And there's it seems, maybe I'm misremembering, but there's 4 different burqa essays.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm obsessed with this nonsense. So what explains
totally
it? So
right.
What happens?
Yeah, so, yeah, absolutely. And just to pile onto your point, Hitchens is from the UK, Brexit happened, not that long after he died. Which was part of the reason it happened was because the political failures of David Cameron. There was a line where Hitchens was asked what he thought about Cameron, and his response was, "He doesn't make me think," which is funny.
It's
right?
funny, yeah, but also very stupid.
Also super unhelpful, right?
Right.
That's not that's it, right?
Right?
So what he was devoting himself at this point to was the most simplistic possible form of jingoistic warmongering, that because Saddam Hussein is bad and evil, and because, the terrorists are bad and evil, then, rah, rah.
Rah, rah.
And on the other hand, I say this as an atheist, but an incredibly reductive and uninteresting version of anti-theism where you just sort of turn this abstraction of religion into this bogeyman that explains everything. Literally, the subtitle of one of his last books, religion poisons everything, right? So it's not whatever people are responding to here. It's not the analytic rigor. He was capable of bringing analytic rigor, but that's not what's going on in these videos.
Right.
And so what is going on? Well, part of it, he's got a great sense of humor, of course, right? That never left him. His writing never left him. Part of it is just both in the writing and in the speaking, incredibly good rhetorical packaging. And that's not a bad thing, right? We don't want to demonize that. When we talk about these PR firms that you're bringing up, we certainly want to train people to see through what they're doing, but we don't want to be purists about we don't care about how we rhetorically package our arguments, because of course, if we care about winning, we absolutely have to care about how we package our arguments rhetorically. But it's important to teach people how to see through it. Right? One of the things I talk about in the book is the Christopher Hitchens effect, which has a lot to do with just the fact that he has, in Hitchens' case, an accent that Americans are trained culturally to associate with intelligence and insight.
Yep.
And even more generally, just the fact that he had an accent, they had speech patterns that ring slightly unusually to us. And this is actually exactly one of the reasons that Jordan Peterson has been so successful in finding an American audience, because as different as his kind of, rural Canadian backwater background is from, Christopher Hitchens's, posh and boozy, speech patterns, the effect of somebody who, this is like a traveler from afar who speaks in an unusual way to me, right, to us, and they just know stuff I don't, right? When Jordan Peterson, the first clip we watched, said, "I've spent a lot of time thinking about this," right? Which, I sure think better, but but this is an effect that if you're, it's easy to get lulled into, but. I guess maybe we could just wrap up on this point, right? That if you don't learn to take a step back and recognize that you're being ensnared in this, then you're going to fall for some truly ridiculous charlatans. So one obvious example. So Bill Maher, who is, friend of late Christopher Hitchens, had him on his show numerous times, praised him, etc. When Milo Yiannopoulos was on Bill Maher's show, Maher, as much as he would like to revise this bit of history, said, "You remind me of a young Christopher Hitchens." And think, what is it that reminds you about Christopher Hitchens? I mean, I don't think Milo has ever had a thought more complicated than feminists are ugly or I like black dick, right? I mean, literally those are the thoughts that he expresses. But he's got that private school British accent, and he's got some of the cocky self-confidence, and a little bit of a sense of humor, not very much.
He's no Hitchens, and all he's doing is. And I think the other thing, just the final thing too, is that then it also just reconstitutes. Like Christopher Hitchens is just giving you George W. Bush with a posh accent. Jordan Peterson is just giving you, transphobia and hystericizing about socialism and whatever else with a kind of, that sort of off the beaten path kind of flavor. So I think that's the other piece. And of course, I mean, Milo just, I can't even put him in that category, but just the reconstituting of conventional wisdom that seems to be packaged differently. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.